and Marie.
It's a nice tea.
It's real tea, right?
Yes, it's not as strong as the tea I'm used to.
Is it good?
It is good, yes, it tastes very good.
What do you think?
Tastes better than Aussie tea.
But the only way you'll ever know for sure is by taking up the Tea Garden's free offer to do the same. In Dedido, Farland Chang, Cable News. Police continued to comb the dense brush at the scene of the crime. One officer used a metal detector in search of a gold chain and other jewelry that police suspect motivated a 14-year-old minor to stab to death 6-year-old Michael Anthony Valdez. His body was found late yesterday afternoon in this tin wood shack. Fire and police officials responded after his mother reported he had failed to show up at school. Police now believe Michael never got to school because a 14-year-old dragged him away to the tin shack. Lieutenant Phil Dennis says around midnight, Guam police came upon the suspect when his parents brought him in. They thought their son knew something that could help solve the crime.
So they were just wanting to cooperate. Next thing you know, several hours later, their son has been arrested for the homicide.
How they react?
According to the detectives, I'm sure it was a total shock. They were surprised that their 14-year-old son committed this thing. So.
Police cannot reveal the name of the suspect because he's a 14-year-old minor, but police did say that the juvenile had failed to show up to classes at Untalan Middle School, that he never knew the victim, and that he may have acted with more than just himself.
We did have information of maybe another minor involved, a 9-year-old, but how much is involved, we don't know at this time. So it's possible that we could have another apprehension in connection with that. Right now we just have the one.
Meanwhile, nearby at San Miguel Elementary, Michael's teacher, Cora Ray Benal, mourned the loss of one of her favorite students.
He's very generous. Yeah, even me one time he brought me a cake and teacher, this is for you.
Michael was also about to enter into the Gifted and Talented program.
You know, that he's curious about everything. Everything he sees, he's curious. Teacher, how come that one is upside down? Teacher, how come that he's facing this side and he's facing that way? And, you know, that's very observable behavior.
And some of Michael's kindergarten classmates recalled yesterday's trauma.
The mom was crying. Yeah, the mama and the daddy. And even the sister. Yeah.
To counsel the kids, the school plans to start tomorrow after the initial 24-hour shock subsides. Counselor Sheila Murphy says teachers will look out for students who look troubled.
As far as details, underplay the details because kids' imaginations, tend to become inflated.
Murphy says kids 6 and under actually cope better with death than those older. She says the younger one's concept of death is more temporary. But even still, she advises parents of all children to take part.
Observe your child for the next 2 to 3 weeks because they may start to display symptoms later on of nightmares. If your child feels afraid to go to school or nervous, drive them to school or escort them to the bus stop or meet them after school because that's going to be kind of a normal reaction. And we want to make sure that they feel safe,
And while the school attends to the children, Guam police will refer the crime to the Attorney General's office for prosecution. In Totu, Farland Chang, Cable News. Cable News.
Check for push rod travel. So what I want you to do, I want you to apply your foot on the brake. And I want you to do is to, when I say brake, brake. When I say release, release.
In Jigo, Felix Salas gives orders as he prepares to inspect a truck owned by Island Trucking Company. Against the first brake, Salas measures his gauge to see if it meets the 2-inch rule, but he finds it exceeds that by 1/4 of an inch. The second brake violates the rule even more.
Police! Looking at my push rod, it comes to 2.5 inches.
What's the danger of 2.5?
It's not very good. There's no brakes applying to the drums, so it's really, he's not getting any brakes at all.
Frank Benavente, who enforces weights and measures, says a big 20,000-ton truck out of control poses big danger.
The drivers of the big trucks, should they be involved in an accident with a smaller truck, I mean, my God, you'd be sure that it won't be the driver in the big truck. But, you know, it's out there and it's waiting to happen.
The problem of bad brakes on big trucks is widespread. Last year, of all the trucks inspected, 65% got pulled over for unsafe brakes.
Benavente blames truck operators who place profit over safety.
These drivers, these operators, these companies should take more time to train their drivers, to put profit in the business aside and make safety be their priority.
To stop such violations, officials take these trucks out of service until they're fixed, and that can cost money. Benavente adds that he wishes the Guam Police Department could help out by giving out tickets, which means even more direct fines. But he says right now the problem is a low priority until more people die. In Jigo, Farland Chang, Cable News. Cable News followed a team of work safety inspectors as they recorded 200 safety violations at the Department of Public Health, the place where many families, young and old, seek medical aid. It starts with a carpet on which we walk. OSHA's Frank Guevara says it's no good.
They're deteriorated in most areas. They can become a tripping hazard.
Also, if someone spills on the carpet a sample of bacteria or blood, the germs can soak in deep. Instead, tile floors should replace carpets because tile is easier to clean. As for ventilation, there is none. You can see from the outside, the building has no windows.
When you lose your main power source, then you don't have any ventilation going through the building.
Without windows, harmful vapors inside the rooms can sometimes escape into the public corridors. That problem shows up in the chemistry lab room. Here, a defective air duct allows fumes into the hallway.
The danger is that acid and corrosives are a health hazard. It affects and disturbs the respiratory system.
Meanwhile, over in the bathroom, no one made the clearanceway large enough for wheelchair patients to get through easily. And when it comes to removing broken chairs, no one has done the job. Another job left undone, fixing the broken ceilings, which allow water to leak in. As for the big double doors leading into the halls, Guevara says they are defective.
A device should be installed that would automatically release and close the door in event of fire.
You can see another fire hazard in this emergency exit hallway. All these shelves block the full path. Down that hallway, Guevara ordered the maintenance room shut down.
I consider this a serious violation. So I've addressed this with maintenance and to close this down and clean it out, okay, immediately.
And next door, Guevara also shut down the mechanical room, again for blocking exits.
It's being used as a catch-all storage and everything, very poor housekeeping practices. And even those electrical panels, okay, under the National Electric Code, there must be some clearance for emergency work. It should not be blocked or obstructed at any time.
The violations extend outside as well. All sorts of trash block the exit. Nearby, we see garbage bins that fail to cover up the trash.
Can be used for harborage of pests and rodents.
In the parking lot, broken government cars use up parking for patients.
There's 27 cars that are useless just sitting here, okay, rusting away.
OSHA inspectors found more than 200 safety violations in this building alone, and this isn't unusual. Of the 13 other GovGuam agencies inspected by OSHA, officials say safety violations are very common.
How did all this happen? Chief Public Health Officer Karen Cruz blames the problem on lack of resources.
We know we have some severe problems. It's
terrible in some places. I think with the help of OSHA and their report, we're going to be able to justify where we need certain resources so we can take corrective action.
From here, OSHA citation will allow public health 12 months to solve their problems. In Mangilaw, Farland Chang, Cable News. A Navy rescue chopper resumed the search after daybreak for the 2 men thought to have drowned. Boats from the Coast Guard and fire police teams also searched in the waters off NCS Beach. Then at 8:15 this morning, 17 hours after the first call for help, a jet ski rescuer searched about 200 yards from Shark's Hole where the group had been snorkeling. That's where Fire Captain P.M. Terlahi says they found one body.
He had his full clothing on, also with his fins. The only thing he didn't have on is his mask and snorkel. The body appeared to be badly bitten by the undertow current, being slammed to the reef.
Terlahi gave no names for the 2 captains until the Air Force informs their next of kin. But he did say they were reportedly average swimmers and newcomers to Guam. Newcomers drowning at NCS Beach are not new, according to Police Sergeant David Camacho.
This area is known for drowned person incidents. There were several people that were drowned in this area. There are fishermen that visit this area for fishing activities, but they know the area and they know what routes to take around here.
From here, the waters may not look that rough, but authorities say that on this part of the island, the beaches can be deceptively hazardous. That's because the waves just past the reef can create a strong undertow.
And the waves, they range from roughly 10 to 12 feet high of waves. And they follow normally by another wave of about maybe 6 times. And that's the dangers of that water and its undertow.
Another danger at Shark Hole comes from the sharks infesting there, something Richard Castro knows about.
Sometimes I see sharks. You know, we catch like tuna. Sometimes we see them jumping them down.
Because the waves and current are so hard to predict during this rainy season, experts say if Mother Nature gives you the hint, the best advice is get out fast. At NCS Beach, Farland Chang, Cable News. Development on Guam has been booming throughout the past 3 years since Anthony Apparon became Archbishop, and many on Guam have been waiting all that time for him to take a stand on development. Cable News has learned that the Archbishop will publish his views this weekend. The letter, which Cable News has obtained, makes a veiled attack on Japanese investors, saying that Guam is under a new kind of occupation. It is an influx of external forces exerting tremendous influence on the future of our people, and once again undermining our people's right for determining our own future. The letter warns against the trend of many landed families, such as Catherine Leon Guerrero's in Tumon, of being lured by instant wealth and then selling their property to the highest bidder. Catherine, who has seen most of her 100 nearby family members sell their property here, agrees.
We took care of each other and it was safe. You know, you could leave your door open and it just is not the same.
Are the neighbors very friendly?
I don't know the neighbors to say that they're friendly or not. And probably if they are, I don't know. I don't know who they are. We see the different cars coming up, we meet each other, probably sneer at each other for almost hitting one another.
The Archbishop's letter blames political leaders, sensitive to the need for votes in the next election, and who make decisions which do not protect the most vulnerable in our society. He concludes that we must not sit back while outsiders buy out our island, leaving future generations voiceless and landless. Yes. Catherine is glad to hear of the letter. But Catherine's grandfather, Vicente, feels there's nothing much he can do to stop the change, and he is sad that he can no longer feed the family chickens or hear the church bell ring. In Tumon, Farland Chang, Cable News.
It's like there's firing here. You know, they did a lot of burning when you have that much gray, yeah? In comparison to, you see how gray the soil is?
On the proposed site of the Mangilaw Golf Course, Victor Torres shows how this pottery gives clues to how people lived in prehistoric Guam. But the small area suffered extensive damage last week after some bulldozers cleared part of the land.
See, here's like a rim. Here's a rim of pottery here. See, that's the top right there, where you hold. That's a pretty good size, you know? I mean, what if some of them were whole, you know, and hadn't been destroyed yet?
Victor works for the Department of Parks and Recreation. He's here to make sure that from now on, the Japanese developer will comply with all rules set down by the Territorial Planning Commission's permit. One rule the builders failed to meet was to hire a monitor while grading the land. Contractor Leonard Kaye concedes it was an oversight, and he's promised GovGuam they'll hire one soon.
You know, not out of negligence, but just pure ignorance. You know, we didn't know about these other sites, so, you know, that was the problem.
Damage might also have been prevented if Parks and Recreation had more staff to oversee all this development. Right now, with only 5 field workers and 95 projects, it appears to be a case of too much work and not enough staff. As a result, historical sites are not given the attention they deserve, according to territorial archaeologist Richard Davis.
Of course, historic sites are non-renewable. Once they're gone, they're gone. They cannot be really replaced. The historic houses, the places where important people lived, the pre-war schools, the old churches, you have the Spanish forts, you have Japanese pillboxes, you have World War II battlefields. You have an amazing variety of historic sites.
Davis hopes the legislature will approve a new money bill. Then he can hire 2 more workers, and GovGuam will set up a body to acquire historical sites. But even that, Davis says, will still leave his team spread out and Guam's history at risk. In Manilao, Farland Chang, Cable News. Governor Atta credits the boom in Guam's hotel construction over the past 20 years to incentives offered by the Guam Economic Development Authority. Those incentives include tax rebates on corporate income and tax abatements on real property. Total benefits per year come to nearly $5 million. Guam has done well to entice investors through its qualifying certificate program. So well that some lawmakers want to change the program to help more local firms and not just hotels and resorts. Among those on the Economic Development Committee who want change is Senator George Bamba.
I look at QC program really as a, welfare for the rich and famous.
Bamba favors making hotels ineligible from getting QCs.
I feel personally that it is a mature industry, and we don't need tax incentives to attract hotel developers. They're going to come here because there's money to be made.
But on the other side, GIDA's director, Chuck Chrysostomo, says taking away QCs from future hotels also takes away GovGuam's power to regulate hotels. For example, he says, most hotels have complied with hiring 90% local managers. And the one that has not complied, the Hilton, has given GIDA a plan that they'll do so.
It's a very detailed plan of how they are going to bring local employees within their system into management within the next year. And they have a very detailed explanation by the names of people and the types of training programs they're going to be putting them in. And we are monitoring that each month.
Chrysostomo also took action today on another hotel.
But this morning I just signed a letter to the Okura saying that they're at 83.2% of their managers, and by next month they better be at 85.
But even still, Chairman Regis says most members agree on phasing out hotels from the QC plan and instead giving out more QCs to local agriculture and manufacturing firms. Committee members are expected to vote on the bill within the next 2 weeks. In Agana, Farland Chang, Cable News. To enforce food safety in Guam's 400 eating and drinking places, public health inspectors conduct surprise visits during the busy lunch hour. Today, we followed Felix Lujan as he inspects Sakura's second noodle shop in Agana. After introducing ourselves, we enter the back kitchen, where Lujan tells the manager that his noodle cooker looks dirty.
Can you guys clean this out too? Come and take a look at this. There's a lot of excess particles that are in there. You guys clean this out, okay?
Over in one cupboard, Lujan finds some unmarked bottles of oil. He orders that all such artificial containers be labeled clearly. Lujan gives the same order for the boxes of soap. If these aren't labeled, then someone could mistakenly use it for something else.
Moving over to the sink, Lujan tells the manager he must use running water when thawing chickens, and he must use hot water when washing dishes. Lujan also commands that food stains on the wall be cleaned up. Then on top of the stove, Lujan finds grease condensing, and he asks, where is the filter?
What happened to the filter? This is a violation. Whenever you're in operation, okay, that filter has to be up here.
Without a filter, Lujan says, condensed oil will drip over the food. On the other side of the kitchen, Lujan asks the manager to look at the garbage bin. No cover means another violation. Public health leaders blame poor food hygiene on poor training for the workers. Sakura's other noodle shop in Tamuning had even worse problems last week, and it's still on probation after public health closed this shop for one day for violations such as no fan in the washroom and too many roaches. Sakura's problem with insects is not isolated. In the month of September alone, public health responded to 22 complaints, and inspectors shut down 8 establishments. Food Safety Chief Prep Pralahi says our tropical climate favors bugs and rodents, and when they touch the food, we may be in danger.
Flies, roaches, rats, mosquitoes, those are all referred to as disease vectors, carriers of diseases from man to man or from animal to man.
The worst penalty for a food or drink place is being ordered to close down until they clean up. And the next worst is getting a lower grade for all to see.
I'm just going to be very honest. There's a lot of violations back there right now. Okay. Can you take down that A rating, please?
By going from A to B, Sakura now has 5 days to improve. Lujan says people hate him for what he does, but his goal is to protect lives. In Agana, Farland Chang, Cable News. More than 800 Catholics and Christians escorted those carrying this symbolic cross on which they say the Romans crucified Jesus Christ. This one would join the others at the top of Guam's highest peak, Mount Lam Lam. All this to honor the day on which they say Jesus sacrificed himself for humanity. In the process, they endure a little of the pain they feel Jesus suffered in his last hour. Father Rudy Areola of the Mong Mong Church led the event.
You must carry the cross because of our stupid sins.
Lord. Father Rudy spoke at this second of 14 stops along the way, with this one signifying Jesus bearing his cross. As people of all ages hiked higher, the view over Seja Bay grew more awesome, but those carrying the cross had little time to see it, along with their escorts.
Move up some more, please. Move up some more.
Men from parishes throughout the island took turns carrying the cross. It needed up to 10 men, and it was no simple chore. One of those men was Jim Duenas of Jigo.
It helps me realize what my religion is by carrying the cross and shedding some of the sins that have accumulated over the year.
Well, we're only at the 7th station. We got 7 more to go, but as you can see from people's breathing and from people sweating, this is more than just a mile-long trek to the top. But to these Catholic faithful, they wouldn't do it if it wasn't worth it.
You know, it's supposed to be, you know, like every year I've been doing this and gives me, you know, good luck.
Sacrifice.
And for Jocelyn Napudi of Totu, getting to the top after 2 hours makes her feel great on this Good Friday.
It's a challenge, but it's worth it because I believe that, you know, Jesus did his own suffering and he carried the cross by himself. And I think that, you know, I think I can make time for this because to show God that and Jesus that I can do the same because I love him.
On Mount Lam Lam, Farland Chang, Cable News. Tournaments like these are what it's all about for these karate students. To get here, they put in about $35 a month tuition fee and long hours of sweat and training.
Japan and Hong Kong have joined the U.S. in banning the importation of ivory. It's a big story with some implications for some marketplace vendors right in Waikiki.
A growing number of countries have been joining up in the global effort to save the African elephant from extinction. Elephants are in danger of being wiped out because their ivory tusks are the source of a multi-billion-dollar business. Last week, the president of Kenya burned this mound of ivory tusks as a way of stopping poachers and buyers. But has the U.S. ban on ivory last month had any effect on our market? Here in Hawaii, ivory prices are going up. Depending on the item, prices can be 20 to 50% more than before the ban. That's according to several wholesalers and retailers here who declined to go on camera. As ivory becomes harder to get, some merchants say they're stocking up for later, especially if demand keeps up from tourists like these.
I've looked at it a lot of times, and I thoroughly enjoy looking at it. It's very pretty. I think it's been pretty here, and I've enjoyed seeing all of it.
Well, I collect ivory because it's an elephant, because I collect elephants, and I love it.
But other merchants say they'll soon sell out all their ivory and then move on to other items. They adjust not only for a lack of supply, but also for lower demand from consumers.
You have to dye to make somebody look good, you know, and I don't think it's right.
Genuine ivory has a more yellow tinge with light stripes, while imitation ivory made of fish bone is more white. One merchant predicts that as the real stuff sells out in the market, the fake stuff will take its place. For the African elephant, imitation would be the highest form of flattery. Farland Chang, KGMB News.
The State Department has now chartered planes to evacuate Americans from China within the next 24 hours. Meantime, some who got out on their own arrived at Honolulu Airport today. Farland Chang was there to hear their first-hand accounts of the trouble they saw.
Americans and other foreigners have been packing into the airports to get out of China. Despite the shootings, the general said the students made him feel good, calling them very pro-American and even apologetic for disturbing his group's vacation. Even still, none of those returning today say they'll visit China again unless it changes a great deal. Passing these gates in coming days will be more and more of the 8,000 Americans living in China, especially now that President Bush is urging American visitors and ordering diplomatic families to leave China. Farland Chang, KGMB News.
The latest local, national, and international news, weather, and sports information. Now the most comprehensive news organization on Guam and in the Northern Marianas, the Cable News Team.
Good evening, I'm Farland Chang. Welcome to the Saturday edition of Cable News. Tourism and construction have led to an economic boom greater than Guam has ever seen. But with that growth has come a high cost of land and housing, so high that many lower and middle income folks must remain tenants on their own island. That problem prompted Governor Joe Atta to hold a conference today on affordable housing. At the University of Guam Fieldhouse, aspiring homeowners came out to learn how they can obtain affordable housing. From the private sector side, banks sent representatives to answer people's questions on how to obtain mortgage loans. Insurance companies did the same for those needing to insure their homes. And many folks stood in line to talk to the Guam Housing Corporation to find out how they can help.
What kind of problems have you faced in trying to buy a home?
Mostly it's the bank, but it seems like they'll come up with anything to turn your application down. You know, either you don't have enough credit, you don't make enough, and all that. And I think it's very hard, you know, for middle-income families. It's very hard to plan, even to buy land. It's $100 grand or something.
I see that there's a lot of problems with families nowadays with lack of housing. A lot of broken homes because of lack of place to put the family.
The price of rent is very high, and between me and my wife, we're making pretty good financially. We're making over 40, but with that kind of money, we still can't afford to get our own home.
Lack of credit, for one, right? Especially if you're young, right? You don't have that much credit background. That's another thing that's hard to get, is lack of credit to qualify for any loan whatsoever.
About 400 people came out throughout the day to find out what opportunities exist. Governor Atta says he has found land for the landless by turning over some public land for 500 homes in Dededo. And he says his planning director, Peter Leon Guerrero, will look for more underutilized federal land that the U.S. government can return to Guam. Besides help for the landless, Atta also discussed how he wants to help the lower and middle income people. For the hundreds who showed up, Governor Atta struck a note with which few would disagree.
The people of Guam will not be tenants on their own island. This administration in cooperation with the legislature, has taken several steps to address these needs.
For some low-income people, ADA urged them to apply for home loans from the ongoing federal program funded by the Farmers Home Administration. You can apply for an FMHA loan if your family falls in the low-income bracket. That means making less than $28,000 a year. As for Guam-funded programs, the Guam Housing Corporation picks up where the FMHA leaves off. GHC has two parts. First, an unsubsidized program that lends mortgage money if you make no more than $45,000 a year. Part 1 could loan up to $100,000. In the second part, the subsidized program, which is yet to be fully funded, you can apply if you make less than $30,000 a year. ADA also told the audience of a new program that would help middle-income people. But to pay for this program, called Kahat, he says he needs a legislature to approve $3 million. The program is aimed at helping those who make between $30,000 and $60,000 a year. It works like this. You'd first get a loan from a private bank, then GovGuam would subsidize the interest on that loan. This loan could go up to $150,000. ADA thanked one Democratic Senator, Gordon Mayu, for working with him, and he called on the audience to urge their lawmakers to support the program. ADA says if the legislature passes his housing plans, Guam will have a way to help all income levels. Despite people's individual problems, many came away pleased with what the event offered.
All of a sudden I found that there's all this I don't even know existed, like the Guam Housing Corporation, this Kahat, and right now I'm lining up to find out more information.
From what I see here, it's pretty good. I mean, it's something good that the government had really extended out to the people of Guam. And I hope this thing would continue in the future.
But have you found anything?
I'm still in line, so I'm waiting.
Okay, great.
I think nowadays to own a home, man, you either have to sell dope or be a senator.
For more information on any of these housing programs, you can call the Guam Housing Corporation at 649-4422. A Jonia man is in satisfactory condition at Guam Memorial Hospital tonight after running his truck into a pole last night in Mangilau and suffering internal injuries. Guam police say 17-year-old Thomas Rivera slammed his 1989 black Mazda pickup into a cement pole just before 8 last night. Lieutenant Phil Dennis says the driver apparently lost control of his truck on Route 10 near Father Duenas High School. Fire and police officials on the scene had to use the jaws of life in order to free Rivera from the pickup. Dennis says Rivera suffered from internal injuries and he failed to wear a seatbelt at the time of the crash. Dennis adds there were signs that he had been drinking. And on the other side of the world, taxpayers in Great Britain staged violent protests today against taxes. Rioters in a South London borough started protesting since yesterday. Today's demonstrators threw rocks, bricks, and paint. Yesterday, a push-and-shove match broke out between protesters and police, with people kicking, pushing, and punching. Dozens of people were reported hurt in the battle. The protest comes after the government enacts a new law that taxes all adults to pay for local services. Rumors are circulating that the protesters now want Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher to resign. As for local taxes on Guam, Governor Atta says he supports a federal audit of his Department of Revenue and Taxation. His statement comes shortly after District Court ruled late this week that Reventax should open up its tax records to the Inspector General. For more than 6 months now, attorneys on both sides have clashed on whether the IG's office can gain access to the records, including a so-called list of VIP non-filers.
Now that the court have decided that there is no problem there and that the government would not be in a situation where they would be sued for any problem with respect to confidentialities, I, of course, would recommend and go with the court decision.
District Judge William Keller has allowed Reventax 10 days to appeal his decision. Meanwhile, in local politics, the feud continues in the legislature as Republican senators have criticized their Democratic counterparts for their actions 2 days ago. That's when the Democratic majority moved 21 bills to the voting file without debating them. In a news release, Senate Minority Leader George Bamba says in these words, "The real losers in this process are the people of Guam, because their elected representatives were deprived the opportunity to discuss the 21 bills." Earlier, the Speaker defended the actions, saying the Republicans should have showed up to session on time. While local politicians fight at home, it looks like they're united overseas.
at least when it comes to fighting for Commonwealth status. That's the word from Guam Congressman Ben Blas, who says Guam leaders look much more like a team than leaders from another American island, Puerto Rico. That's where Blas is attending hearings on whether Puerto Rico should have independence, statehood, or a new form of Commonwealth.
And we are all united in Commonwealth and have been for the last 6 years or so, citizens before.
Blas will join tomorrow 7 colleagues of the House Interior Committee for the second day of hearings on Puerto Rico. Coming up next, environmentalists from all over will soon visit Guam, and the fight against drugs gets more focus. Please stay with us.
We're the innovators,
Buenas noches, everyone. I'm Farland Chang. Thank you for joining us for this Saturday edition of Cable News. Just this hour, Cable News has learned that some doctors at Guam Memorial Hospital have gone on strike, apparently over a pay dispute. The news comes one day after the Board of Trustees of the Hospital Authority last night met. We asked GMHA Administrator George Palican when he expects the board to resolve the strike. He replied by telephone that they are monitoring it closely and are hoping for a positive resolution. From the hospital, Palican told us that it is an ongoing process, that they are still evaluating the physician compensation issue, and there will be continued meetings on this issue. When asked to comment if the number of doctors exceeded 10, he said the number is less. In political news, former Governor Paul Calvo's announcement not to run for governor has disappointed his followers, but their loss is Governor Joe Atta's gain. We have coverage from last night's announcement and also reaction from Lieutenant Governor Frank Blas. Polynesian dancers tried to drum up Republican Party unity even before former Governor Calvo announced the news. At the Calvo insurance firm parking lot, Calvo supporters showed their colors. They hope Calvo and Senator Tommy Tanaka The allegedly classified material shows up in the Guam National Guard's newspaper, the Pacific Sentinel, a paper free to anyone interested. A story appears on the 3rd page, a story announcing the details of a secret drill, and a story which involves Washington's Joint Chiefs of Staff, according to one top official who asked to remain hidden for fear of losing his job. Joe, as we shall call him, says the project was named Kennel Sword.
Kennel Sword is a major exercise involving Army, Air Force, and naval troops in the defense of the Marianas.
The article reveals the key players involved. It also shows their objectives, from testing ground defense plans to testing radio communication capability.
If the enemy finds out what troops are involved, start dates, and so forth, they can adequately plan countermeasures to counter any defense.
Since the exercise involves actual movements, Joe says it is critical details remain secret.
The ultimate responsibility here lies with the Adjutant General, Edward Perez.
Perez has served as the Adjutant General for about a year and a half now. Both he and his Chief of Staff, Major Ireneo San Nicolas, declined to speak on camera. But San Nicolas denied all the charges. He says no one has complained about the story, even though everyone has seen it, from generals throughout the U.S. to politicians in Congress. San Nicolas adds that they have checked it out themselves and found no classified data. However, the federal team inspecting Guam's Guard did say the story sounds improper, but they had not yet fully studied the case. In Harmon, Farland Chang, Cable News.
My belief, I think it's a cover-up.
Top officials within the Guam Army National Guard have agreed to speak to Cable News in disguise for fear of losing their jobs. They say the 500-member Guard suffers from a major problem of bad morale, and they blame the Guard's chief, Adjutant General Edward Perez. One Guardsman, who we shall name Harry, says Perez follows the buddy system.
Bottom line, if you're not buddies with the general, you're no one. You're nobody.
Harry says low troop morale has become one of the Guard's biggest problems because Perez helps his friends bypass normal standards. Another top member of the Guard, who we shall call Joe, says the general destroyed one program to save his friend, an overweight warrant officer.
Vicente Flores was caught in the weight control program. The general stepped in and scrapped that whole program simply to save his friend.
Perez has returned none of Cable's calls, and his chief of staff, Major Ireneo San Nicolas, declined to speak on camera. But San Nicolas denies those charges of favoritism. He says the general has not scrapped the weight control program, but he did say he has taken over that program at the general's request.
As for the officer in question here at Fort Muña in Harmon, he has been in the weight control program for a long time, according to the chief of staff, who says that's not unusual because their goal is to help the soldiers, not discharge them. He adds that within the next month, that soldier in question will come up for some type of action, and ultimately the general will decide whether he stays in the program or gets discharged.
Major San Nicolas disputes the claim that the general helps his friends. He says the general treats all soldiers equally, but the major adds that if we ask someone else, they probably have a different opinion. Inspectors from Washington did not return calls to Cable News on those charges. In Harmon, Farland Chang, Cable News.
But he's the role model on glitches.
Sources within the National Guard say that Adjutant General Edward Perez plays politics when it comes to promoting officers within the Guard. One top official who wants to speak out but who fears for his job asked that we disguise him. We have named him Harry.
If you're good friends with him, he'll do anything to get you promoted or get you out of any particular program.
Harry says morale within the Guard is at its worst, and that stems from Perez failing to comply with proper standards when promoting officers. A second top official who also requests anonymity we shall name Joe. He says the general unfairly promoted Jose Terlahi, who also serves as Civil Defense Director.
The director of the Civil Defense, Jose Terlahi, was promoted to the rank of E8 simply because of his political affiliation.
Joe claims the general promoted Terlahi against the will of Terlahi's commander, and the general did so by evicting someone from a slot so Terlahi could take it. Perez's chief of staff, Major Ireneo San Nicolas, declined to speak on camera, but he denies all those charges.
Now, the chief of staff says before Terlahi got promoted, he had to meet all the basic minimum requirements in terms of time and grade served. The chief of staff blames not Terlahi, but his supervisor for failing to recognize his eligibility. And that failure led to a special board meeting and then promoting Terlahi.
But Joe says even there, the Adjutant General, also known as TAG or TAG, urged board members to approve his friend, a fellow Republican within the governor's cabinet.
By being a director, I like the TAG. He is the cabinet member. He basically used that to push other people off and so that he can get what he wants.
San Nicolas again denies the general did anything improper based on politics or friendship. That federal team inspecting Guam's Guard did not return calls to respond to those charges. In Harmon, Farland Chang, Cable News.
But it's just a cover-up.
A top official within the Guam National Guard, whom we have named Harry, blames the Guard's chief, Adjutant General Edward Perez, for damaging morale of the soldiers. He says the general likes to shuffle officers around, something the military does not normally do.
We have different leaders, so whenever they come into a different section, they have a different philosophy of how to run the military. And naturally, the troops are going to get confused, because they got so used to this individual for the past 6 months, and 6 months later, here's a new boss.
Harry says some officers have gotten so fed up with that system they have left, including those who the federal government has invested in as specialists.
Government spends so much money to send you to that particular school, and when that individual comes back, they put him in a different section. I'll give you a good example. A finance officer goes to school, comes back, and when he comes back here, he gets assigned as a logistics officer, for example. That don't work.
General Perez's chief of staff, Major Ireneo San Nicolas, spoke on his behalf, but declined to go on camera. As with all the other charges, San Nicolas again denies these.
The chief of staff says the general shuffles officers in order to get the best man to do the job. He says that depends on the resources and the expertise you have on hand. but he does agree that such shuffling can create turbulence. In Harmon, Farland Chang, Cable News.